Start by peeling your carrots. It's roughly 1 carrot to a pound of meat. It's important to cut the carrots small because we're going to saute them for a short time and we want them to cook quickly. You can cut them in any shape you like. I'm cutting them in a quarter turn. That makes for interesting shapes. Basically what you do is cut at an angle and turn the carrot a quarter turn after each cut. These are small quarter turns. Large quarter turns are nice for stews and soups. Once the carrots are cut, put them aside. Next we're going to cut the onion. I let the onion soak in water for 5 or 10 minutes, and that way it softens the paper skin on the outside. That way you're able to cut the onion and peel off the paper skin without wasting any good onion. So you put your thumb on the knife as a guide, letting about a ½ inch of the knife stick out, and then always turn the onion, not the knife. That way you'll never cut yourself. Again, always turn the onion, not the knife. Turn all the way around and pop the core out. Chop the other side off and peel the paper off the onion. I have seen people peel onions and lose the first 1 or 2 layers when they peel it. This way there's no onion wasted. Cut the onion up into a rough diced. That's going to also be sauteed, so it's not too important the size or shape. We're using Spanish onions here. We don't want a sweet onion. We want an onion with a lot of flavor. When you're done slicing the onions, put them aside too, along with the carrots. Okay, measure your meat and see if it fits in the pot. You may have to cut your meat in pieces if not. This one fits nicely into the pot. Now flour your meat. Sprinkle flour over the meat. Don't go rolling it in a cup or 2 of flour and throwing the rest of the flour out. Just sprinkle enough flour to completely coat the meat. Get it in all the nooks and crannies and cover all the sides. We're going to be browning the meat, and the flour will help to caramelize the outside of the meat. That way the meat will change flavor and it won't have a boiled flavor, even though we're going to be cooking it in a liquid. Don't add salt to the flour. Salt draws the juices out of the meat and will cause the meat to become dry. We're going to add a lot of spices later, but at this point, we don't need anything but the caramelization. Put about 1/8 inch of good oil, preferably olive oil, in the bottom of your pan and bring it to very hot, just before the smoking point, because we want the meat to brown quickly. We don't want it to sit in the oil for so long that it begins to cook. Beginning with the edges, brown the meat well on all sides. You can tell when the bottom is brown when it's no longer sticking to the pan. That's when it's ready to be turned. The best piece of meat will have any large surface fat trimmed off, but will have marbled fat throughout the grain of the meat. If your roast is thicker than 2½ inches, cut it so that it's evenly 2½ inches or less thick. That way it will cook evenly and you won't have a large center portion that will taste boiled. Don't use a cut of meat under 1 inch thick, however. It may overcook or come out dry and stringy. I think any shoulder cut of meat delivers the best flavor for this dish, and that's what traditionally was used. Different shoulder cuts are known by different names in different areas of the world, and are generally very inexpensive. Almost any cut can be used, and this method is not only a great way to make a tough piece of meat tender, but also a great way to taste the difference between different cuts of beef, since the true flavor of the beef is brought out unobstructed. Once the meat is nicely browned on all sides, take it out and put it aside on a plate. Then add your vegetables to the oil and saute them for 5 minutes until about half cooked. Again, we want to give the vegetables a sauteed flavor so they don't impart a boiled flavor to the meat. Add a tablespoon of chopped garlic to the saute. The small amount of garlic and onions should enhance the savoriness of the meat, and the carrots will add some sweetness. However, you shouldn't taste anything but the beef in the finished dish. Now you could add some celery here, and you'd be making what's called a French mirepoix. Just be careful not to add enough celery that its strong flavor becomes evident. When the vegetables are half cooked, remove them and set them aside. Now we're going to take ½ cup of red wine and use it to what we call deglaze the pan that the meat was cooked in. Pour the liquid in and scrape the bottom of the pan to dissolve any of the residue from cooking the meat and the vegetables stuck to the bottom of the pan. Boil the wine until you no longer smell any alcohol. Then we need to add enough more liquid to cover about 3/4 of the sides of the meat, but not enough to cover the meat completely. It should take 1.5 to 2.5 additional cups of liquid, depending on the size of the pan. Use beef stock or vegetable stock for the liquid. If you don't have that, add a tablespoon of beef bouillon first, and then use water. Again, don't cover the meat all the way up with the liquid. If you're not going to cook the roast in the pan that the meat and vegetables were browned in, pour all the liquid into the final casserole, crock pot, Instapot, or whatever is to be used for cooking. And if that final cooking pot doesn't have something to keep the meat from resting on the bottom of the pot, pour the vegetables in first, before the meat, so the meat will sit on the vegetables and will be elevated from the bottom of the pot and won't burn. Then add your spices. Whatever pot is being used for cooking should be covered tightly with a lid or foil. Put it in the oven at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours, or in a crock pot on low for 3 to 5 hours, or in a pressure cooker on medium heat, or Instapot on meat or steam setting for only 45 minutes. When it's done, take it out and allow it to cool to room temperature while still covered. Don't remove the cover until it's completely cooled to room temperature to seal in the juices to the meat.